Welcome to Story Harbor, where every story finds a home. Emotional, cinematic tales of love, sacrifice, and second chances. Subscribe for stories that touch a heart.
What happens when a woman who has spent 6 decades defying every expectation, breaking every rule, and reinventing herself more times than anyone can count, sits down for what should be a victory lap interview, only to have her entire legacy reduced to punchlines about her age and her appearance? What you're about to witness is one of the most explosive confrontations ever captured on daytime television. The moment when Cher, the goddess of pop herself, reminded the world that the woman who survived Sunny, survived the 70s, survived disco, survived the 80s, survived the 90s, and is still standing, didn't get this far by letting anyone push her around. The studio went dead silent. The audience held their breath. And Joy Behar learned the hard way that some icons bite back harder than anyone expects. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments because, trust me, you're going to want to talk about this one. The morning had started with a buzz of excitement that the production team hadn't felt in months. Cher was coming to the view. Not just any celebrity, but a living legend who had been famous longer than most of the crew had been alive. She had sold over 100 million records worldwide. She had won an Oscar for Moonstruck, a Grammy, an Emmy, and countless other awards that filled entire rooms in her home. She had been declared finished more times than anyone could count, and each time she had come roaring back stronger than before, like a phoenix rising from ashes that the critics had prematurely scattered. Cher arrived at the studio with her characteristic lack of pretense despite being one of the most famous women on the planet. At 78 years old, she still commanded attention the moment she walked into a room, not through volume or dramatics, but through sheer presence that seemed to bend the space around her. She was there to promote her new album and her upcoming residency tour, proof once again that she had no intention of fading quietly into the sunset just because society thought she should. Her publicist had assured her it would be a friendly conversation, a celebration of her remarkable 6-decade career. What nobody anticipated was that Joy Behar had arrived that morning, determined to do exactly the opposite. Behind the scenes, sources would later reveal that Joy had been making comments for weeks about what she called the parade of aging celebrities refusing to accept their expiration dates. She found it tiresome, she said, watching these legacy artists cling to relevance when they should be gracefully stepping aside for younger talent. And Cher, with her continuing tours and new albums and absolute refusal to disappear into comfortable retirement, represented everything Joy found exhausting about celebrity culture's inability to let go of the past. The studio lights were bright as Cher took her seat at the famous table. She was dressed in black, as she often was, her signature dark hair framing a face that had launched 1,000 tabloid covers over 6 decades. The audience erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever. A standing ovation that brought a genuine smile to her face and tears to the eyes of some longtime fans who had waited years for this moment. Whoopi Goldberg, herself a legend in her own right, opened the segment with obvious respect and affection. Our next guest needs absolutely no introduction, but I'm going to give her one anyway because she deserves it. 6 decades in the entertainment industry, over 100 million records sold, an Oscar, a Grammy, an Emmy, and still going strong. Please welcome the one and only Cher. The applause continued as Cher settled into her chair with the ease of someone who had done this more times than she could possibly remember. Well, thank you. That's very sweet. I've been watching you all for years, so this is fun for me too. Sarah Haynes asked about the new album, and Cher's eyes lit up as she discussed the music, the collaborations with younger artists who had grown up listening to her songs. The joy of still being able to create something new after all these years, when so many had written her off. She spoke with the candor that had always defined her public persona, unfiltered and completely unapologetic. You know, people keep asking me when I'm going to retire, Cher said, her distinctive voice filling the studio with its familiar warmth. And I keep telling them the same thing. I'll retire when I'm dead. Maybe not even then. I'll probably haunt some Vegas casino and keep performing for the ghost audience. The audience laughed warmly. This was the Cher they had come to see, irreverent and unstoppable, and exactly as sharp as she had always been. For a few minutes, everything felt exactly right. Then Joy Behar leaned forward with that familiar glint in her eyes, and the temperature in the room dropped noticeably. The other hosts recognized that look immediately, the predatory energy that meant Joy was about to go somewhere unexpected and potentially dangerous. "So, Cher," Joy began, her voice carrying an edge that made the other hosts shift uncomfortably in their seats. "You talk about never retiring, about keeping going forever. But let's be honest here, you're 78 years old. At what point does this stop being inspiring and start being, well, a little sad? Watching someone who clearly should be enjoying their retirement still out there trying to prove something to the world?" The question landed like a bomb in the middle of the studio. The audience went completely silent. The other hosts exchanged looks of disbelief. Cher's expression didn't change dramatically, but those who knew her could see something shift behind her eyes, a sharpening of focus that anyone who had crossed her over the decades would recognize as a warning sign that should not be ignored under any circumstances. "Sad?" Cher repeated the word slowly, as if tasting something unexpectedly bitter. "You think it's sad that I'm still doing what I love, that I'm still selling out arenas around the world, that I still have something to say and millions of people who want to hear it?" Joy waved her hand dismissively, a gesture that seemed designed to minimize everything Cher had just said and the decades of work behind it. "I'm just saying what a lot of people are thinking, but are too polite to say out loud. There comes a point where you have to accept that your moment has passed. You had a great run, Cher, an incredible run. But maybe it's time to let younger artists have the spotlight instead of clinging to it like it's a life raft." Several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Sunny Hostin looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Even Whoopi, who had seen plenty of controversial moments on the show over the years, seemed taken aback by Joy's aggressive directness toward a guest of Cher's stature. Cher leaned back in her chair, and when she spoke, her voice was calm, but carried an edge that could cut through steel. "Let me ask you something, Joy. How old are you?" Joy seemed caught off guard by the unexpected question. "I'm 82. 82, Cher repeated slowly, letting the number hang in the air for everyone to absorb. "And you're still sitting at this table every day, sharing your opinions, doing your job, collecting your paycheck. Should you retire? Should you step aside and let younger journalists have the spotlight? Or does your rule about knowing when to quit only apply to other people and not to yourself?" The counterattack was swift and devastatingly precise. Joy's face flushed slightly, a crack appearing in her confident exterior for the first time. "That's different. I'm not up on stage in revealing costumes pretending I'm still 30 years old." "Pretending I'm still 30? Cher's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Honey, I've never pretended to be anything I'm not in my entire career. I'm 78 years old, and I look like a 78-year-old woman. I just happen to look like a 78-year-old woman who takes care of herself and refuses to apologize for it. Is that what's really bothering you here? That I haven't let myself go the way you think I should have?" The audience murmured with a mix of discomfort and something that might have been approval. Joy pressed forward, seemingly determined not to lose ground in this unexpected battle of wills. "What I'm saying is that there's something a little desperate about these endless comeback tours. You've had, 5 farewell tours now? At some point, farewell should actually mean farewell. It starts to look like you just can't let go of the past, can't accept that your time in the spotlight is over." Cher's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Let me tell you something about letting go, Joy. I've let go of 2 marriages, including one that was broadcast to millions of people every week. I've let go of people I loved who died too soon. I've let go of decades of my life to an industry that told me over and over again that I was finished, washed up, done, a relic of another era. What I haven't let go of is my right to keep working, keep creating, keep living my life on my own terms. And I never will, no matter how many people like you tell me I should." She leaned forward, her presence suddenly commanding the entire studio in a way that reminded everyone exactly why she had been a star for 6 decades. "You want to know what desperate looks like? Desperate is someone who sits behind a desk, taking shots at a woman who's accomplished more in her life than most people could accomplish in 10 lifetimes. Desperate is trying to tear someone down because their refusal to quit makes you uncomfortable about your own choices, your own mortality, your own relevance. That's desperate." The response hit its mark with precision accuracy. Joy's smirk faltered, but she recovered quickly with her characteristic defensive aggression. "I'm just pointing out what everyone can see with their own eyes. The plastic surgery, the costumes, the wigs, the whole elaborate production. It's a lot of effort to maintain an illusion that time has somehow passed you by. At what point does it become more about vanity than actual music? The mention of plastic surgery seemed to hang in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Cher's expression shifted to something that looked almost like dark amusement, but there was cold steel underneath it that anyone paying attention could clearly see. "Ah, there it is," Cher said, nodding slowly. "I was wondering how long it would take to get to the plastic surgery. Let's talk about that, Joy, since you brought it up so eagerly. Yes, I've had work done. I've never denied it, not once in my entire career. I've been completely open about it for decades when other people were lying through their teeth. You know why? Because it's my face, my body, my choice. And I don't owe anyone an apology for doing what I want with my own appearance." She turned to address the audience directly, her voice gaining strength and passion. "You know what's interesting? When men in Hollywood get older, they're called distinguished, dignified, silver foxes. They're cast as romantic leads well into their 60s and 70s opposite women half their age. When women get older, we're told to disappear quietly and gracefully. And if we try to maintain our appearance, we're called desperate and fake and plastic. If we don't, we're called washed up and past our prime and letting ourselves go. We can't win either way, so I decided a long time ago to stop playing that rigged game entirely." The audience began to applaud, but Cher wasn't finished. The dam had broken, and decades of deflecting these criticisms with a smile were giving way to something far more powerful and necessary. "I've been famous since I was 18 years old. I've watched this industry chew up and spit out women for 60 years. I've seen talented, brilliant women told they were too old at 30, at 40, at 50. Women who had so much more to give, pushed aside to make room for the next young thing. And I decided early on that I wasn't going to let anyone else define my expiration date. Not the studios, not the critics, not the tabloids, and certainly not people like you who think their opinion should dictate how I live my life." Joy tried to regain control of the rapidly deteriorating conversation. "But don't you think there's something inauthentic about all of it? The wigs, the costumes, the elaborate productions? Is that really you up there on stage, or is it just a character you've created to hide behind?" Cher's laugh was genuine this time, but it carried a bitter edge that cut through the studio like a knife. "Inauthentic? Let me tell you about authentic, Joy. Authentic is growing up so poor that my mother had to leave me at an orphanage for a while because she couldn't afford to feed me. Authentic is being told I was too weird, too ethnic looking, too different to ever make it in show business. Authentic is having dyslexia so severe that I couldn't read a script properly until I was in my 40s, and having to memorize everything by having someone read it to me over and over again. That's authentic." She paused, her voice dropping to something more intense and personal. "The wigs and the costumes, that's armor. That's what I built to protect the authentic me from a world that was constantly trying to tear me down. And you know what? It worked. I'm still here. How many of the people who said I was finished are still relevant today? How many of the critics who wrote me off are still being talked about? I've outlasted them all, every single one of them. And I did it by being exactly who I wanted to be, not who anyone else thought I should be." The studio was completely silent now, hanging on her every word. Even Joy seemed to be processing the weight of what had just been said. "But let's get back to your question about letting go," Cher continued, her voice gaining a painful intensity. "You want to know about letting go? I stood at Sonny's funeral after spending years watching the media turn our divorce into entertainment, into jokes, into punchlines that followed me everywhere. I stood at that podium and eulogized the man I had loved and hated and loved again, the father of my child, while cameras captured every tear for the evening news. That's letting go." Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on with determination. "I watched my child struggle with their identity for years before coming out as transgender, and I stood by them when half the world had opinions about my parenting, about my family, about decisions that were none of their business. I didn't handle it perfectly at first. I made mistakes. But I learned and I grew, and I supported my child through one of the most difficult journeys a person can take. I've buried friends, lovers, colleagues. I've said goodbye to more people than I can count. So don't you dare sit there and lecture me about letting go. I know more about letting go than you could learn in 10 lifetimes." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Cher held up her hand with an authority that silenced the entire room. "No, You've had your say. You've questioned my relevance, my authenticity, my appearance, my right to keep working. Now you're going to hear mine." She stood up, her full presence commanding the studio in a way that reminded everyone exactly why she had been a star for 6 decades. "I started performing when Kennedy was president. I've survived Vietnam, Watergate, disco, Reagan, 2 Bushes, and everything in between. I've had #1 hits in 6 consecutive decades. 6. Do you know how many artists have done that in the entire history of recorded music? I can count them on one hand and have fingers left over. And you want to tell me it's time to step aside?" Her voice was rising now, filled with the kind of passion that had powered her through 60 years of hits and heartbreaks. "I've sold out tours that younger artists would kill for. My songs are still played on radio stations around the world every single day. I have fans who are 18 years old, who discovered my music on TikTok. I have fans who are 80 years old, who bought my first album when it came out in 1965. I connect generations, Joy. I bring people together. What exactly do you do besides sit at this table and criticize people who actually create things?" She turned back to Joy one final time, her gaze unwavering and fierce. "I've been counted out more times than I can remember. After Sonny and Cher ended, they said I was finished. After the 70s, they said I was finished. After the 80s, they said I was finished. After Believe, they thought it was my last hurrah. And every single time, I came back stronger. Not because I had something to prove to them, but because I had something to prove to myself. Because giving up was never an option. Because I love what I do too much to let other people's opinions stop me from doing it." She gathered herself with the kind of dignity that only comes from having survived everything life could throw at you. The question landed with devastating precision. Joy's face had gone red, and she was gripping her pen so tightly her knuckles were white with tension. "I'm asking legitimate questions about celebrity culture and aging in the entertainment industry," Joy said, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence and bravado. "No, you're not," Cher fired back without hesitation. "You're doing what people have done to me my entire career. You're trying to put me in a box, trying to tell me what I should be, what I should do, when I should quit, how I should look while doing it. And I have the same answer now that I've had for 60 years. No, I won't. I'll do what I want, when I want, for as long as I want. And there's nothing you or anyone else can do about it." She turned to the audience, her voice softening slightly, but losing none of its power. "I want every woman watching this to hear something important. You do not have an expiration date. You are not past your prime just because society says so. You have the right to keep working, keep creating, keep living your life exactly how you want to live it, no matter how old you are. Don't let anyone tell you when to quit. Don't let anyone tell you what you should look like or how you should act at any age. That's your decision and yours alone." The audience erupted in applause that seemed to shake the walls of the studio. Cher acknowledged them with a nod before turning back to Joy, her expression shifting to something that might have been pity. "You know what the difference between us is, Joy? I've spent my life building things. Albums, tours, movies. A career that spans 6 decades. I've created joy for millions of people around the world. I've given them songs to dance to cry to fall in love to. What have you built? What will you leave behind? A collection of insults and hot takes that nobody will remember a year from now?" She shook her head slowly. "I feel sorry for you, Joy. I really do. Because somewhere along the way, you decided that tearing people down was easier than building them up. You decided that cynicism was the same thing as sophistication. But all you've really done today is show everyone watching exactly who you are." She gathered herself with the kind of dignity that only comes from having survived everything life could throw at you. "And who I am is someone who's going to walk out of this studio, get on a plane, and perform for 20,000 people who paid good money to see me sing. And then I'm going to do it again tomorrow night and the night after that, and for as long as I damn well please. Because I'm Cher, and I don't quit. I never have, and I never will." With that, she walked off the stage with the same confidence that had carried her through 6 decades of fame. The audience erupted in thunderous applause, and Joy Behar remained at the table, looking like someone who had just learned a very difficult lesson about picking fights with living legends. What do you think about this incredible confrontation? Was Joy Behar out of line, or was she just doing her job? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that will absolutely leave you speechless.